a lack of supporting infrastructure. And so Charge was started to solve a problem, to build the infrastructure. So we don't engineer the charging stations, we design and engineer putting them into the ground. So two very different parts of the business.
Right.
We do what kind of is known as the pickaxes and shovels. We do, the installation, the all the engineering around that, all the permitting around that. We do it now in 40 states across the country, so we've got active projects going on everywhere. And as you could imagine, with the fast and adoption of electric vehicles,
Right.
without the infrastructure there to support it, it's very difficult to see it evolve.
Yes, I totally agree with that. In fact, I mean, especially with the boom that we're having, it is very it is very common to see just out there these these cases, right, of people using an EV saying that every couple hours they just have to stop and recharge. It does happen. So thank you very much for giving us that overview. Now you already mentioned that what Charge does is not building the actual devices, but the infrastructure for the stations, right? Which is honestly a really cool thing. But before we delve a little more into the engineering aspect of all this, I do want to ask you, Andrew, how did you find yourself in these electric vehicle sort of charging world, and when did you decide that you were going to be the one to address this issue and build this infrastructure for the future of sustainable transportation?
Well, actually, I took the idea to somebody else
Ooh.
and told them, "Why don't you do this idea?" For me, I have a very nice business in real estate services, and so the thought of starting a new company wasn't really on my mind. It turned out the person that I went to start the business was the company Lime that I went and invested in,
Mhm.
and they told me it wasn't for them, and I saw it as such a big opportunity that I, in 2019, in January, decided to incorporate and start the business. Last year, we had sales of $690 million, so it's
Wow.
grown quite rapidly. But you're talking about sometimes, and different types of entrepreneurs. Sometimes entrepreneurs talk about things and then they try to assemble people.
Right.
I was just like, I'm going to do it. And even, and I had just gotten the itch in a new sector to do it again, and I'm like, "Oh, here I go again." But when you're that type of entrepreneur, I think sometimes if you see a market opportunity, you go for it, and that's what I did.
Oh, wow, that's absolutely amazing. And I absolutely agree with you. Many times these entrepreneurship sort of ideas sometimes just end in paper, right? Like, which is great that you didn't let this one go to paper. Now, Church didn't really go through this sort of startup phase. Not the typical one, because in the end, it already had you on the charge, right? Which is pretty much Andrew.
Oh no,
Um,
we had we had one employee,
oh,
and then we had two employees, and then we now there's over 400 employees. But no, it
wow.
started in my daughter's bedroom at her desk, actually. I'm not even joking. And then it moved downstairs to my kitchen table, and
Progress,
and
yeah.
then the first and then the first couple people got hired, and you got an office, and then before you know it, you're a real business.
Wow.
But ideas take real determination to turn them into businesses. And a lot of people, like you just said, the idea dies on paper. A
Mhm.
lot of people are conditioned to let them die on paper. My belief was is that, and still is, that this is a, forget multi-billions of dollar opportunity in terms
Right.
of business, but this is a very important facet of seeing this clean technology evolve. Is
I
someone's
agree.
got to design, engineer, install, and maintain the critical equipment to do it.
Right.
And so my belief was is that that didn't exist at scale, and I was dumb enough to try and do it.
Hey, it worked definitely. You already mentioned that just last year you sold over 600 million, which is amazing. I'm curious though, what were some of the first obstacles you had to face when you started Charge? Because I mean, I can just imagine that electric vehicles at the time were really not that popular, or were they already starting to take off?
No, they're still not that popular, Sam.
Well, that is
So
true.
that's the good news. The bad news is that they're not going to be popular until there are enough models out there that everybody wants to drive.
Mm,
And in Europe, the government is mandating more of a shift to electric vehicles. In America, that's not the case yet. It's
mhm.
starting to happen, but it's not the case yet. And so you're going to have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 million EVs on the road probably by the end of this year.
Right?
By the end of the decade, you're going to probably have 35, 40 million EVs on the road. By middle of 2035, that number is expected to double, so you'll have 80
Wow.
million. That will still only represent about half of all the vehicles on the road. So today we have over
This is
200
United
million,
States
200,
only.
correct. We have 290 million vehicles in the United States alone.
Wow.
So put this in perspective. You're talking about a generational shift. When you have kids, okay, you're still in your 20s, right?
I'm in my
When
20s.
you
Yeah.
have your yeah, when you have your kids and they are starting to drive, there will be no other options but electric vehicles. Today, that's not the
Right.
case. And so I use the analogy with cell phones. You have a cell phone?
Of course, I have a cell phone. Yeah.
Course. But I guarantee when your parents were 25 years old, but maybe they did, but when
It
they
was
were
not the level
adolescent,
of smartphones we had. That's for sure.
correct. And so what's going to happen is over the next 25 years, EVs are going to be everywhere in every single driveway, but it will take all of 25 years to shift that.
Right.
And my belief is that represented such a significant business opportunity. Wow, you're going to have to build this infrastructure and then maintain it. And you have all the permitting and jobs that it creates. There's so much good that this creates because you've got one side that it's economic output, you're
Hmm.
creating jobs and spending. And then the second is you're bringing this clean transportation to the masses. So
Right.
these are really strong market timing opportunities. And you know, I think in light of everything that's going on, this technology and especially what Tesla's been able to do,
Hmm.
this is revolutionary stuff, and so we're at the forefront of it. So it's a wonderful moment to see this kind of come into focus.
I mean, I agree. It definitely is a turning point. I believe that we're getting into, right? Especially with the example you said, right? Like 25 years ago, there were no phones. In 25 years from now, there are gonna be only electric cars. I agree with that. Now, I do have a question though, which is in the terms of
By
this
the way,
kind of
there won't be only electric cars, but it'll be like 97.5% of all the new
mostly,
vehicles sold will
right?
be electric, and then you'll have enthusiasts who are still old school.
Right, like the current enthusiasts that still save up their dial phones that you had to twist simply because of of what it represents, right, in the history. I definitely agree with you on that. But I do have this question on when you first started these, and you already mentioned the things about permits and the things about how complicated it can really get to really get out there. How hard was it to install the first, the first station that you maybe design and really put into place, versus today maybe that it is something already very efficient? I would assume. How hard was it?
Well, that's a good question. Anytime you're doing something the first time, you're always going to have, in any business, learnings that you're going to have to apply. And
Mhm.
as you now we're over 1,000, you're just going to have to adapt and adapt and adapt and adapt. My guys would say that they learned how to fly the plane while it was in the air. That's what they would say. But I think a testament to hard work and strong business principles is it's actually not that hard. The good news is it's really not that difficult. The hardest part is the permitting
Right.
and all the paperwork. The actual install is not that difficult, and that was the beauty of it is.
Right.
And I think that even at scale, that's not the install part's actually the least of your concern and takes the least amount of time compared
Hmm.
to everything else.
Right. I
So to
mean,
put this into perspective,
mhm.
permitting takes longer. The actual on-site work is less than 2 weeks in most
Oh,
cases.
that's pretty fast. I mean, it makes sense because in the end, generators, batteries, inverters, they're not new tech, right? They've been around for quite a while, so it's definitely not that hard to install it. But I was very curious about the permitting side, especially given that maybe 10, 15 years ago, I'm assuming there was not a lot of regulation when it came to EV infrastructure, right? Not as it is right now, that it has been scaling up with the time. So I would definitely assume that back in the day, the permitting was even harder. Now, how different is it to work on permitting and this type of stuff on the US versus maybe in Europe, if you wanted to install something there?
Well, the United States is like 50 different countries. Okay. Every single state has its own permitting
Hmm.
and its own municipal approvals that you have to navigate through. Then you might have to coordinate like local tax incentives and
Hmm.
EV rebates that. And so we are 50 different countries. And then within those 50 different countries, every state has counties. So there's not one size fits all for permitting
Right.
domestically. Europe, has got the exact same issue. They just actually are a multitude of different countries.
Hmm.
Some countries, certainly the Nordic countries where they have access to hydropower,
Right.
they're innovating on EV stuff like you've never seen. And if you want to really learn about where the market's going, you would study the Nordic countries. As
Wow.
you get into the middle of Europe, everywhere from Germany to Holland to basically every major country within the EU has got some kind of EV strategy now.
Hmm.
And they are trying to determine how to incentivize people to get off petrol. Now,
Right.
they import all of their fuel. So if they can harness through solar, wind, geothermal, wherever they can get it,
Hmm.
and supplement their cost of fuel. Domestically, actually, we could actually produce all the fuel we need. We don't.
Right.
We're an import economy, but North America as a whole actually has plenty of reserves, so to speak,
Right.
to power us for probably the better part of the next 50 to 100 years. And I know, people don't realize just how much oil we have
Hmm.
as a country, and yet, we're still claiming that we are dependent. So Europe's in a different place than America.
Hmm.
And America is also a car culture. We drive across the street in America. Everywhere
That is
else
true.
in Europe, they take trains. And so the acceleration to EVs is a little easier when the government is mandating it and you've got such a strong public network
Hmm.
of transportation. We don't have that in America. So what's going to happen is America is going to catch up on the EV stuff because we're car culture, and then
Hmm.
we'll fly past everybody.
Right. I mean, that is one very key thing that you just said, which is about this car culture, precisely, right? Um, Now, for this car culture, I mean, of course, definitely it is booming, as you already said. People are getting more and more electric cars out there, and more companies are coming out, just like Charge Enterprises. They are coming out. They are working on EV infrastructure, they are working on these new places and this networking. So, what is Charge doing to stay really ahead of the curve in terms of maybe innovation or the devices that you install or the placement or the locations? What is Charge doing to really stay at the top, at the forefront of these?
Well, I think when you think about being at the forefront, the good news with the charge business model is that we're agnostic to the hardware. So the research and development and the heavy innovation really will take place at the hardware
Hmm.
level. For the permitting, for field tools, for installation purposes, there'll be all sorts of new technological advances that will help increase the likelihood that you can expedite a job because you've done the last one before you talked about learning.
Hmm.
But we're not trying to innovate per se in terms of the hardware. That's not
Right.
our responsibility. That's outside of our swim lane.
Yes.
Our innovation has to come in the permitting process, in the
Okay.
streamlining process, in the building renewables into the what's going to power this EV charging. So, one of the biggest frustrations is you can't really pull enough power yet from renewables, affordably store it,
Hmm.
and then renew it and deliver it at scale just yet. But
Right.
there's a great company out there. It's called Beam, and their company's innovating, trying to figure out how to use renewables to
Hmm.
fill the tank, so to speak, up within the EV ecosystem so that you're not burning something to actually fill up your electric
Right.
vehicle. And that's really where the innovation is going to come. That's really where I think people are going to start to get some traction in terms of innovation is when you really see the ability to connect this infrastructure in a mannerism where you can pull 75% of its power
Hmm.
from some renewable source, store it affordable enough, and then deliver it at scale so that when you have 100 cars all trying to charge at the same time, that you can deliver a high quality experience like you can
Of
at the gas
course.
station.
Right, right. I definitely agree with that. Now, I wanna follow up just in this last side that you already mentioned, which is right now in the current projects that you install in the current infrastructure for EV charging stations. What is the current average power capacity, or how many cars can you actually charge right now, like at the same time, in a charging station?
Well, remember, they're not our charging stations, so we're installing
Oh,
for
well,
other
that is true.
people. And typically, the we're installing a DC fast charger,
Hmm.
so you can do a rapid charge in 30 minutes, and you can charge cars all day long.
Right, right, right.
And usually there'll be two or four pumps, so to speak, coming off of that, but that's
Okay.
about the range.
All right, I see. I understand. Thank you. Now, one thing you already mentioned back, which is a key part of your installation, is that you're equipment agnostic. Right? You already mentioned this. You don't really go for one or the other, but I mean, of course, you need to maintain a certain standard of quality, right? So, what are some of the most important parameters that, with the years, you've figured out are like the key when choosing which device to install in maybe a specific project, maybe something that varies from location to location, if weather-wise, I don't know, things like this. What are these parameters that you think are the most important ones?
Well, that's a little bit of a loaded question. Here's why: because we're mandated the hardware that we need to use, and then
Hmm.
oftentimes we'll make a recommendation around it.
Right.
But once again, I would be outside of my swim lane trying
I see.
to force Ford to use one type of system
Hmm.
versus another brand to use another. we're a service provider. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as a service provider, and we predominantly focus on the automotive industry, when they say jump, we just say how high, and
Nice.
we don't mandate things to them. So, once again, the innovation takes place on another part
Mm-hmm.
of the equation within this ecosystem. You've got, I like to kind of articulate this in just a simple way, which is you've got really innovative companies building the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
You've got unbelievable technology that goes into, the software and hardware to make these batteries work. So you've
Right.
got the automotive company, you've got the battery company, and those two companies work very, very closely. And then the third is you need the infrastructure company to build the infrastructure
Right.
for those two companies to sell their products. And so we are the third. So
Mm-hmm.
we are oftentimes not mandated any hardware. We
I
work
see.
with most of the big hardware providers,
Right.
but the goal of the business is to see the mass adoption of EV. And in order to effectuate that, it means that we have to work along a series of hardware providers that are mandated by our customers. And then
Mm-hmm.
that way we can do more faster as a result of it.
Right. Totally understand that. And thank you very much for sharing this. Now, I want to touch more of your founder CEO career history side of this because I mean, you are a serial entrepreneur. Like that is such a specific, I mean, in my opinion, such a cool title, right? That you start multiple companies. That's really really crazy. And I have a very specific company. There's a question, sorry, regarding the charge company that you have. When growing a small business, a small company like you just said, right, that started over at your daughter's desk, then moved to the kitchen. When growing a small company to becoming a Nasdaq corporation, a Nasdaq integrated corporation, how do you ensure that your engineering power, your installation power, your finance, backbone, how do you ensure none of these falls behind with this exponential growth?
You have to expect that you're going to make mistakes. So you want to fail fast. You better surround yourself with great people. You know, I believe that the most important aspect to a success of a business outside of its market timing is its team.
Hmm.
And, you know, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And so if you could put a matrix together, a skill matrix of sorts,
Uh-huh.
oh, who you need on your team, where your skills are and where their skills are, and so that there's not too much overlap,
Hmm.
you start to define a set of principles that you believe can take your idea with its great market timing, turn it into a product, have a business model that
Hmm.
makes revenue, and go. And you're likely to fail 9 times out of 10 on each one of those steps if you don't have the perseverance
Right.
and you don't have the fortitude. So, when starting a business, kind of like running for political office, you kind of have to have your head examined because it is very, very difficult. It's very long. If you started your own business also. And so, you know, so yeah. So I apologize, Sam. I have this other thing. I wanted to
Yes,
try to wrap us up by 2:30.
totally
So we have a
understand.
couple. We have a couple minutes left. Anything else you want to ask before we wrap up?
Yes. Now, typically at the very last time, I ask for an advice, but you already shared with us quite some really good advices, especially this one you said to fail fast. I really like it. So, the last question that I have for you, poaching again your entrepreneurial brain, you've been on both sides, asking for investments and being the investor. So, in your opinion, Andrew, what makes a really solid, good pitch?
I think anytime you're in front of an audience that is cold to you, that creating a storyline of why your product or service is, you know, better than somebody else's. And if you can't articulate that in 30 seconds, then you've got a tough job. I've got to get into this other thing. It's starting right now.
Don't worry.
But the most important thing is perseverance, Sam. Okay. Without
Perseverance.
perseverance, there is nothing. I got to run though. I apologize.
That's totally
Thanks.
fine. Thank you very much. You have a great day. All right, guys. Well, that was a little unexpected. I'm gonna put over on this side. That was a little unexpected, but hey, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Remember that you can find more information, interesting articles, and interviews directly on our website, buildernation.io. We're gonna love to hear from you. Also, go ahead and follow Charge Enterprises on their website and their social media handles. They are doing some really cool. Thank you very much, guys, and we're gonna see you on the next.
When building the future is your priority, tedious procurement processes should be last on your list. The problem is that purchasing data is scattered across spreadsheets, receipts, emails, and messages. Tracking it all sucks and makes it easy to commit mistakes. Introducing the Control Hub Way, the all-in-one purchasing software for hardware companies. Buying parts, services, or office supplies? Submit a quick purchase request to buy from your list of approved vendors, or buy from a new provider. Buying from approved vendors is even easier. Import your shopping cart directly into your purchase request using our checkout integrations. When the order is ready, submit it for approval. We'll ping all pre-designated approvers both via Control Hub's website, email, and Slack notifications for a faster turnaround. If you need a PO, we got you. Generate it in one click. Online purchase? Boom, virtual card. Do an automatic 3-way match, pay invoices, and sync everything live with QuickBooks or NetSuite. Purchasing just got a lot easier. Control Hub. Get back to building.